Wow, this is so fun. Let's talk about the architects next. For your discretion, we will be talking about Subnautica 2 in this video. When we get to that segment, I'll make it clear in case you want to avoid spoilers. Additionally, spoiler/leak talk will not be tolerated in my comments. But if you do want to discuss Subnautica 2, my Discord server has a dedicated channel for Subnautica 2 talk, links in the description. And so, without further ado, the architects, also known as Precursors, are the race of aliens that built the structures that we see on 4546b. They arrived on the planet roughly 1,000 years before the Aurora crashed. They used the planet as an isolated research facility for the deadly Kara bacterium. Tragically, their research efforts were cut short as their primary research facility was attacked and destroyed, spreading the bacterium throughout the planet, causing a large planet-wide mass extinction event. Seemingly, Kara was an infection that plagued the architects' multiple planet-spanning civilization, as their core worlds needed to be quarantined, and as we know, their research was conducted on remote planets. We know that 143 billion individuals died due to the bacterium at the time of recording their contagion profile. It is unknown how many more died after the outbreak, and only one is confirmed to still be active. In this video, we will be going over everything we know about the architects. I have categorized points of discussion as follows: appearance, technology, structures, society, Alan, and then finally, after all of that, we will enter spoiler territory for Subnautica 2. So first up, let's talk about appearance. When it comes to the appearance of the architects, it is important to note that their minds exist as data and are constantly networked together. It is likely that an architect would be just as comfortable inhabiting a computer as they would a physical body, or vessel, as Alan calls it. However, we know that having a vessel is much more preferential than not, likely because it allows them to interact with the physical world. Furthermore, it is likely that the architects were able to switch vessels depending on the situation. However, the PDA states that there is comfort and prestige in maintaining one single body over a long period of time. The vessel that we get to see belongs to Alan. We don't know if this vessel is preferential to him or what he even prefers, but we do know that he finds it suitable at the very least. We know that the vessels are highly modified versions of the architect's pre-civilized bodies, and the cells of an architect vessel are pluripotent, meaning they can become any other cell, like a stem cell. The vessel is a biotechnological marvel, being comprised of not only advanced technology, but also DNA signatures from 27 different sources, only 6 of which are known. The chromium boar of Catwell Prime, an invasive species known for their extremely tough skin, which makes them hard to eradicate. The putty serpent of Apostakar. This snake has extremely tensile skin, preventing it from tearing and allowing it to compress itself into small spaces. The electrode eel of Lifton generates an electrically charged slime across its body. The astral rays of the moons of Marden 14. These rays have small organs that generate and store electricity. The shaggy goats of Olympion. These herbivorous creatures live on the rocky foothills of the mountain planet Olympion and are excellent climbers. The giant geckos of Holt's asteroid. Massive geckos that emit electrostatic charge on its footpads. This creates a charge difference in the surface the gecko is climbing. The vessel lacks a face that is discernible to humans, implying that perhaps architects do not rely on body language or facial expressions as humans do, likely because they're all networked together and transmit their thoughts and needs across the network. Though it is worth noting that when Alan speaks, his lights change color depending on what he is saying. It's unknown whether this is involuntary or if Alan has spent enough time in the mind of a human to where he now knows that humans require external information other than simply words to understand context, as Alan is unable to physically network with Robin the way he would with another architect. We can see Alan blinking or warping short distances. It's likely that this is preferential to physically walking, as it is much quicker. This ability likely uses similar technology as the self-warping quarantine enforcer units. The PDA tells us that the vessel is powered by a biological-technological hybrid heart that transports blood and nutrients to the biological components and power to the technological brain. It's also worth mentioning that the organ sample scanned and used in the vessel has no respiratory or digestive tract, meaning that the vessel relies solely on electrical energy to live. Notably, once Alan is in control of the vessel, he assimilates several pillars into 6 limbs that hover behind his body. This is likely to account for the less dexterous limbs attached to his physical body. Additionally, the facility lights up when he gains autonomy. It's likely that he's networking with the building itself and is physically a part of the building, as the architects see no boundary between technological and biological components. We see something similar happen when Alan takes control of the ship. This time, however, his body goes limp and his mind is fully uploaded into the vehicle. This can imply that any given structure or building could have architects inhabiting it, and we would never know. Scannable within the primary containment facility, the alien building block is, like the architects themselves, made of both organic and inorganic components. The PDA states that it shares both genetic and technological crossover with the warpers. The PDA also speculates that this building block may have been an essential component in architect technology. While I do not doubt this may have once been true, to me, the block looks far too primitive compared to everything else that we see. It also gives me reason to assume that other artifacts and technology found across 4546b are not architect in origin. More on that later. Ion cubes are essentially the backbone to architect technology, to our understanding. They are effectively alien batteries that store a massive amount of energy inside. It's unknown exactly what they're made of, but we can assume that at least some part of them are made of the large emeralds that we can see in the Arctic Spires cache, as that cache was used to mine ion components. We know that in the crater, they're fabricated in the primary containment facility. The self-warping quarantine enforcement units, better known as warpers, are another biological technological marvel. Like the architects themselves, the warpers are cyborgs, though the warpers appear to be much more organic than the architects. Warpers were created to hunt and kill anything infected with Kara, hence the name, and are extremely effective at doing so. They possess the ability to teleport at will using miniaturized phase technology. Warpers are no longer in production, meaning that technically they could be classified as an endangered species. Like the architects themselves, warpers possess no digestive tract, though the PDA does state that they have a nervous system. While they may superficially resemble the Sea Emperor, the PDA states that warpers have no genetic crossover with anything on 4546b. The warpers likely have some level of sentience as they're able to communicate with one another meaningfully. They likely communicate via radio waves as the radio is able to pick up on their transmissions several times. These small robots were built to patrol architect bases and make small repairs. They are equipped with 2 welding tools and are very simple in design. They will attack the player if they get too close, but this is not the primary purpose of the robot. These robots are able to scale walls and ceilings, and just like practically every other piece of architect technology, run on ion power. The PDA states that the robots are resistant to wear and are energy efficient. We can assume that they were meant to be deployed and then forgotten about. It's likely that the architects had many different types of small robots to carry out tasks around the bases, as menial labor was likely below the architects. The alien arches are medium-range teleporters that the architects use to nearly instantly teleport from place to place. Teleportation requires 2 gates to be linked. The primary side needs to be powered by an ion cube for the teleporter to work. It is possible that the humans in the Subnautica universe have access to the same or similar technology with their phase gates, as we can see an architect phase gate in Sector 0, and it resembles a ginormous version of these arches. The tablets are effectively key cards used to access architect facilities in the crater. They come in 3 different colors: purple, orange, and blue, with red and white tablets existing in the game files but never appearing in-game. These various colors may indicate different levels of security clearance. They're fabricated using an ion cube and various other minerals, so what exactly they do other than just open doors is a complete mystery. The PDA speculates that they may have been personal computers. Perhaps they were something like a floppy disk or a CD. As we can see, a more rudimentary tablet in the primary containment facility, which upon scanning speculates this very idea, adding that the rudimentary tablet may be kept as a form of legacy support. Within the deep lily pads cache of Sector 0 grows a plant with an incredibly unique biology. Scanning it suggests that it was designed by the architects likely solely for decoration. The plant's cells are undergoing a process called transdifferentiation, which, in the simplest terms possible, means that one adult cell turns into a different type of adult cell without becoming a stem cell first. This effectively makes the plant immortal, as it is constantly replacing unhealthy cells with healthy cells over time. The nanobots scanned in the primary containment facility are smaller than any technology that humans have access to in the Subnautica universe. They're so small that they appear invisible, and because they're so small, we really can't tell what exactly their use was. That being said, we also have no way of knowing if they are architect technology or not. We can assume they are, given that somehow architects have managed to store more than 1 bit of data per single electron, meaning that they have the means of manufacturing technology that is extremely small. The tracking implant, to me personally, does not look like architect technology. However, it does transmit an architect frequency, so who's to say, really? It's possible that it's a very rudimentary device, not up to date with their modern technology. We know that the device was likely attached to a Leviathan of some sort, collecting biological data and also obviously tracking the location of said Leviathan. The translation device found in the primary containment facility appears to be very old Architect technology in the same style as the rudimentary tablet. The device was only able to translate other languages into the Architect language. The device stores data from over 1,000 different languages, including at least one Earth language, as we know that CHBC Live appears in the device's data. Created by Alan using the energy mass in the Architect phase gate facility in Sector 0, the shuttle takes Alan and Robin through a giant Architect arch to an intermediary gate in space, which then goes to the Architect homeworld. We know that this shuttle can safely transport a human, meaning that it is pressurized and has an oxygen supply. Alan integrates with the ship, effectively becoming the ship in order to pilot it. It is unclear whether the mass that Alan uses to construct the shuttle are only able to construct a shuttle, and we also have no clue how he does this. The ship itself must be incredibly advanced, as appearance-wise, it appears to just be the cockpit and some bits on the sides, with no discernible method of propulsion other than like the little thing on the back, though that is to be expected from Architect technology at this point. Storage sanctuaries were constructed by the Architects in order to back up their mines in case of emergency. Several sanctuary caches can be found in the crater, and one in Sector 0. We'll talk more about these caches later. We see two different types of storage media in these various caches. First is the data hubs seen in the crater. These hubs are all networked together, and it is unknown how many individuals are stored within these hubs, nor is it known whether the individuals stored in the hubs are conscious or not. The second is the containment cube found in Sanctuary 0. Scanning this cube grants us significant insight into how these devices work. They use, and I quote, a redundant array of quantum holographic storage layers supporting a hyperdense capacity of 35 bits per electron, which is obviously far beyond anything humans have ever created. We also know that in this storage cube, the intelligence stored is conscious, which means that Alan has been awake and conscious for roughly 1,000 years, reflecting on everything. There are also various scannable artifacts from Sector 0 that don't have too much information about them, so I'll briefly go over them now. The purpose of the array module is unknown, and Alan does not offer any insight. It emits lights at different wavelengths. Potential uses are as follows: communications array storage, holographic display, relaxation, or cosmetic. The latter two are less likely in my opinion, because the array module is found in a seemingly random location. The energy generator accumulates and releases massive amounts of energy very quickly, likely as a way to keep the Architect power grid stable and prevent any short circuits. The fossil excavator does exactly what it sounds like. It uses sonar to locate the fossil and then uses precision lasers to excavate. The greenhouse is an Architect greenhouse used to cultivate local flora. Go figure. The ground sampler is a programmable robot that collects and analyzes soil samples. Interior technology resembles something analogous to a human-made spectrograph. Effectively a miniature aquarium, the marine life analyzer may have been used to run a wide variety of experiments on various small marine life. The material analysis station is effectively the Architect version of an electron microscope or a mass spectrometer. The mineral distillery extracts various material from the water. This makes sense as we know that there are lots of various minerals all over 4546b, and it makes sense that they leach into the water. The obelisk is poorly understood. It may be some sort of energy transfer device, or a communications array node, or some other type of scientific equipment. We just don't know. An Architect satellite that has fallen from space. It was likely used to transmit data. The water analysis station is used to analyze water samples, obviously, which is important on a world whose surface is mostly water. Altera has also hybridized some Architect technology with their own. Ion batteries and power cells are exactly what they sound like. Human batteries enhanced by Architect ion cubes. The tether tool and Sea-Truck teleporter module likely use very similar technology as the warpers to teleport whoever is holding the tether tool. It's likely that Altera got their hands on the corpse of a warper and has been trying to reverse engineer as much Architect technology as possible. The quantum locker is effectively an ender chest from Minecraft. It is possible that this is a unique form of technology that we haven't seen, which allows the transport and storage of objects over long distances. This could also just be a clever use of the teleporter technology. We just don't know enough. The recyclotron can break down nearly any crafted object into its base materials. It's unclear what exact technology is in play here, as it doesn't really match with any pre-existing Architect technology that we know of, but there are almost certainly a million different pieces of Architect technology that we just don't know of yet. The rest of the alien technology in the game to me personally does not fall in line with what we can expect from Architect technology. That isn't to say it was never used by the Architects, it just doesn't resemble the concise designs of their technology. We know that Architects came into contact with other alien races, so it makes sense that they would utilize their technology. It could be argued that not all Architect technology looks the same, but we have too much evidence that disproves that argument for me to believe. My counterpoints are as follows. Architects are networked together, meaning that they share ideas and thoughts. Their technology style is a culmination of every Architect's ideas, meaning that the appearance of their technology is sort of a singularity. Every single piece of confirmed Architect technology has the same design scheme. Why would they randomly decide to switch it up for a handful of random gadgets? The alien rifle is really what started this idea of mine, because why would an Architect not just use one of their 6 technological limbs as a weapon? We see Alan configure his limbs presumably to his preference, so what was stopping him from making one of those limbs into a gun? Additionally, amongst these artifacts in the primary containment facility is an earth blade, an alien carving resembling the yin-yang symbol, and an alien statue. Why would the Architects keep these relics amongst their own technology? Let me know your thoughts in the comments, but we'll get to my own theory when we talk about the primary containment facility shortly. Located in the northern blood kelp zone of the crater, this sanctuary cache is one of the 3 sanctuaries found within the crater. It is within this cache that we learn the purpose of these sanctuaries: to back up and safely store the minds of the Architects. Not much else is known about this sanctuary, but that being said, there likely isn't much purpose to the sanctuary other than being an emergency storage cache for Architect minds. In the deep sparse reef, we have the next of the 3 sanctuary caches found in the crater. This cache almost definitely serves the same purpose as the northern blood kelp cache. The layout is slightly different, but I highly doubt that matters. It is within this cache that we learn that the ion cubes here are not being drained of power and thus are likely ceremonious in some way, potentially implying that the Architects may have had some sort of reverence towards these cubes. The final sanctuary cache in the crater is located within the dunes. This cache serves the same purpose as the other 2, only this cache gives us some unique information. Downloading the data on the terminal gives us an abridged life story of one of the Architects. This PDA entry gives us a lot of good details to speculate over, but I'll talk about them more when we talk about Architect society. Located within the Lost River, the laboratory is different from the previous 3 caches, as this cache is obviously not a sanctuary. Here we can see that the Architects were researching the local ecosystem. We can read from the data terminal and scan PDA entries that the Architects had an immense understanding of 4546b's biosphere. Preserved in stasis are several fossils from various leviathans being studied, as well as various plants. Most interestingly is the large fossilized leviathan skeleton located just outside of the laboratory. The fossil is over 1 million years old, and so the laboratory was clearly built here purposefully, which makes sense. I know that several paleontology enthusiasts watched my previous video, and if any are here, I want to know how stoked you would be to get to work right next to a giant fossil like this. Like, it just makes sense that scientists would want to set up their lab here. Anyways, here in this cache we can also find a cuttlefish egg, implying several things. 1. Architects may have kept cuttlefish as pets. 2. Architects may have been studying cuttlefish for some reason. Or 3. Architects may have had some hand in creating the cuttlefish. I have a few of my own theories regarding the cuttlefish, but I'll save them for a more relevant video, so subscribe if you want to see that. The Quarantine Enforcement Platform is located within the crater on 4546b. It is effectively a ground-to-space cannon that shoots down any spacecraft that attempts to get too close to the planet. The Quarantine Enforcement Platform can only be disabled by an individual who is not infected with the Kara bacterium. The purpose of the Quarantine Enforcement Platform is to keep healthy individuals from entering and infected individuals from leaving. I have reason to speculate that this building was used as a sort of security headquarters as well, given the alien rifle and doomsday device located inside. Speaking of which, let me talk briefly about these 2 devices. The PDA states that the Doomsday device possesses enough energy to destroy most of the solar system. This is likely a last resort in case of emergencies. The reason it was not activated was likely either because nobody on the planet escaped, or that the device had already malfunctioned by the time the bacterium had breached containment. The rifle raises a few other questions, given that it doesn't appear to be Architect in nature. Additionally, given what we know about the anatomy of the Architects, it's unlikely that an Architect would be able to effectively use this weapon, and as I mentioned earlier, it would be much easier to use one of the 6 mechanical limbs as a weapon. I'll talk more about my theory on why I think this rifle is here shortly, but tangent aside, this facility also possesses an enormous moon pool, implying that large amounts of something were being transported to and from this location. I once heard a theory that the beam that shot down the Aurora, Sunbeam, and Degassi was a tractor beam as well as an energy blast. However, I don't think this is true, as the Mercury 2 was hit twice. Once was a glancing blow that damaged their thrusters, and the other was a direct hit that split the ship in 3. Either way, the Mercury 2 landed in Sector 0 both times, leading me to believe that the Degassi just got incredibly lucky with their controlled landing, and the Aurora was intentionally searching for the Degassi, so it makes sense that they crashed nearby where the Degassi did. And obviously the Sunbeam was trying to land on the island that the quarantine enforcement platform was situated on, so yeah, no tractor beam. However, we do know that the beam can arc around the planet, as shown by the Mercury 2 being in Sector 0. At 800 meters deep in the Lost River, the disease research facility can be found. The facility is highly damaged and flooded with water. We know that this was caused by a sea dragon leviathan attacking the facility, whose remains can be found nearby. The architects used this base to research the Corabacterium as well as produce treatments. One such treatment was the construction of the previously mentioned warpers. This facility also housed a large leviathan at some point, though it has since died. Most notably though, the disease research facility was conducting research on leviathan eggs, including but not limited to sea dragons and sea emperors, as the architects found that some leviathans were immune to the contagion. The architect that we meet in Subnautica Below Zero, Alan, was the head of Kara research at this facility. He tells us that he went against network directive in order to expedite the production of a cure. Alan decided to incubate leviathan eggs, not realizing how powerful and determined adult leviathans were. The facility was attacked and the contagion escaped. This event is what initiated the planet-wide quarantine. In this facility, we also learn a great deal of information about Kara itself, and also various species across 4546b, including the common peeper, as well as the different ray species of the crater. All of this may imply that the researchers that worked here were willing to try literally anything in order to find a cure, which makes sense given the mortality rate of the bacterium. 1.2 kilometers under the crater in the inactive lava zone lies the thermal power plant. This facility presumably powers all of the architect facilities on 4546b, as well as powering ion cubes. Gameplay-wise, this facility acts as a breadcrumb in the trail to the end of the game, so truthfully, it isn't all that dense with lore. It's simply just a power plant. We do learn here that roughly 1,000 years ago, presumably when the Corabacterium spread, there was a mass extinction event, and the life on 4546b took a massive hit in terms of biodiversity. The thermal plant also gives us the location of the final facility within the crater. The largest architect facility found within the crater at a depth of 1.4 kilometers deep. The primary containment facility is the home of the last remaining Sea Emperor Leviathan. The primary containment facility hosts many different things that make the true purpose of the facility somewhat of a mystery. Most notably to me are the artifacts in the antechamber of the facility. Like, I know why they're there from a gameplay standpoint. It's because it's the final alien base in the game and it's cool to have lots of lore bits here. But why would the architects put these here? Especially considering that a decent handful of the artifacts are not architect in origin. Providing evidence to a theory that I'll talk about when we discuss the society of the architects, I believe that the facility is a museum of sorts. A place where people go to learn things. Not exactly a fun family attraction, but a place to go to access knowledge that may be otherwise hard to find. Maybe, if the architects were working with other races on disease research, those species would need a way to access information because the architects can just communicate via their network. Just something to keep in the back of your mind for later. Either way, let me know your thoughts in the comments. The facility also houses an ion cube fabricator. Why this is here and not in the power plant is a mystery to me. Additionally, this facility also possesses a large collection of creature eggs, seemingly one of each species in the crater. We know that eggs were somewhat of a fixation in regards to the disease research, so it makes sense that these are here. Notably, 2 sea dragon eggs can be found here, but the reason the base is not bombarded with sea dragon attacks are the sonic deterrents outside of the facility that seemingly keep the leviathans from getting too close. The facility also contains an operating room. In this room, we find that in a desperate attempt to find a cure for Kara, the architects performed a vivisection on one of their few Sea Emperor eggs. The procedure very quickly killed the fetal Sea Emperor within. Scans show that the stomach lining samples were extracted from the fetus. Unfortunately, this procedure yielded no results. Most notably, and the source of the name for the base, the primary containment facility houses the last living Sea Emperor Leviathan. Contained within an enormous aquarium, she was housed here due to her natural production of enzyme 42, the cure for Kara. Her aquarium contains an alien arch, which, when it was active, would have allowed smaller creatures from the surface to enter and exit, creating the micro ecosystem that we see. Additionally, water is piped to and from this facility from the surface. We can see exactly where the water intakes and outlets are, as we can see the various architect vents in various places on the surface. Common peepers travel through these vents, carrying with them microdoses of enzyme 42. This is likely the reason that life has not gone extinct on planet 4546b. Additionally, the Sea Emperor may be communicating with the peepers, as we know that the peepers swim into the vents willingly. The PDA states that peepers are adapted to essentially sniff out enzyme 42, but it also states that peepers are more intelligent than the average prey fish. Perhaps they're intelligent enough that the Sea Emperor can make contact with them. Who knows? How the Sea Emperor was transported here is unknown, though it is likely that she was teleported into the facility somehow. The Sea Emperor has been housed in the facility for roughly 1,000 years, and her health has declined substantially, though through sheer force of will, she has stayed alive in order to see that her eggs hatch. Upon the hatching and release of her babies, the Sea Emperor's health rapidly declines, and by the time the player has left the planet, she dies. The facility also hosts several alien arches that connect to various points on the surface, all of which just so happen to lead to the correct plants needed to craft the hatching enzymes for the Sea Emperor's eggs. How convenient. One thing that bothers me about this facility is the fact that it's so deep, not only underwater, but also underground. Why does it need to be this deep? My initial thought is for security purposes, but why would the architects go through all of the effort of constructing a large structure so deep near such dangerous leviathans? Perhaps it was to be closer to the thermal generator in case of emergencies? I think the greatest theory is that it was built here because it was so secure. Nothing unauthorized leaves, nor does it enter. But do let me know your own thoughts in the comments. The Arctic Spire cache of Sector 0 was a mining site for ion components. It's unclear how large this cache may have actually been, as it has caved in. This collapse killed at least one architect that we know of. This individual acts as the blueprint for the architect tissues used to fabricate Alan's vessel. This site was likely extremely important to the architects, as it may have been the only place on 4546b where these specific emeralds grew. After planetary quarantine, it would have been impossible to import resources, and thus all technology must have been made locally. The Crystal Caves cache was likely a secure storage facility for certain essential components. This is where we can scan the architect organs for Alan's vessel. This cache is incredibly small, though it likely holds extremely valuable items. We can see several crates closed and stacked here, with the crate containing the architect organs conveniently propped open and removed from the neat stacks. Personally, it seems likely to me that whatever may have been in the other crates was not important for the construction of a vessel for Alan, as he would have mentioned it otherwise. Do let me know in the comments what you think may have been held in the other crates within this cache. I'd like to know your theories. The Deep Lily Pads cache, to me, is the most interesting of the caches in Subnautica Below Zero. This cache is confirmed to be a place of reflection for the architects, which affirms my belief that they aren't all strictly business. The cache is decorated with ornamental plants and waterfalls, with a large statue of an architect standing as a centerpiece. In the middle of this cache lies the skeleton of a fallen architect. It is unknown if this individual died here or if the remains were brought here. Either way, it seems that the death of an architect, given their near immortality, is seen as a great tragedy. This being the final resting place of one such fallen architect likely means a great deal to Alan. The only known Sanctuary cache in Sector 0, it is likely that Sanctuary 0 was reserved specifically for whoever may have been leading the operation on 4546b. This is where Alan has been kept for roughly 1,000 years. Unlike the Sanctuaries of the Crater, Sanctuary 0 contains only one architect mind and keeps that mind conscious. I believe that this is so that if anyone were to find the planet, the architect can reach out and begin to rebuild. We can infer this because any time anyone enters Sector 0, Alan plays a distress signal. It is unlikely that this facility was meant to be active for as long as it was, as when Robin enters, a power warning is broadcasted. It may have been assumed by the architects that once a cure for Corral was found on another world, they would be removed from stasis. However, we know that the architects never found a cure, and so no architects ever came to release the others from storage. At 950 meters deep, the Fabricator Base is the deepest architect facility in Sector 0. This base was used by architects to fabricate new vessels whenever necessary. This was almost certainly one of, if not the most important facility to the architects on 4546b, as reprinting frequently was likely a necessity once Karab reached containment. It is unknown why exactly the architects stopped fabricating new vessels for themselves, but my theory is that at a certain point, the Karab bacterium became too strong. It had mutated to basically have an incredibly fast incubation period, and it began killing faster than the architects could reprint each other. Let me know why you think the architects stopped fabricating new vessels in the comments. I'm hoping someone has a more optimistic take. The Phase Gate facility is the final location of Subnautica Below Zero. As the name suggests, the facility houses a phase gate that leads to the architect homeworld. Alan states that the phase gate remained hidden for a millennia, as it was imperative that the homeworld remain safe. The facility has 3 parts. The lower level, which contains the power room and the arch that leads to the upper level. The power room contains a large device that Alan repairs, which powers the phase gate. The upper level is effectively a landing pad where 6 energy masts idle until someone assimilates them into a spacecraft to travel through the third part of the facility, the phase gate itself. The phase gate is enormous and resembles a giant alien arch when powered. It is likely that humans use similar technology in their own phase gates. The phase gate is stored in a large pit in the ground until Alan activates it. This pit housed the phase gate for 1,000 years, keeping it completely undetectable to humans. It is impossible to say with certainty what Architect society would have been like in everyday life, but we can assume that they were highly technological and highly efficient. We know that communication was constantly happening over the Architect's network. We know that Architects are born from a seed and grow up in broods. These broods presumably go through some sort of education or training, and we know that individuals can be singled out for special training. I think it's likely that the seed an Architect is grown from is less like a plant and more digital. Sort of like how in Minecraft the world is different depending on the seed, but for Architects, their whole brain is different depending on the seed, and they're given a vessel to inhabit. It's almost certain that the Architects do not reproduce in the traditional sense, rather their young are generated and fabricated. We know that in times of crisis, Architects can upload themselves as data, discarding their vessels, as seen in both the crater and in Sector 0. It is possible that higher ranking individuals may have more luxurious storage, as we can see Alan, the head of the Kara research on 4546b, gets his own storage device, where the Architects in the crater are all stored in one sanctuary cache. We know that Architects do possess the ability to copy their consciousness into another vessel indefinitely. However, this act is considered rude, and it is accepted in Architect culture that any self-respecting individual would atone by immediately deleting themselves. We know that Architects can download corrupt data, and it affects them to the point where they have to be stored away for refactoring, implying that Architects are susceptible to both biological viruses and digital ones. Early on, Alan speaks as a collective, saying,
"We require a suitable body for transfer."
When questioned, he says,
"We do not think of ourselves as individual,"
confirming that the Architects may have been something of a hive mind, which makes sense knowing that they're all networked together, but he then goes on to refer to himself as I, which implies at least some sense of individuality. Alan tells us that as long as an Architect is able to shift to a new vessel, they cannot truly die. This makes sense, as we learned that 96 is considered young, which, yeah, compared to effectively infinite, 96 is one of the smallest numbers. This then brings up the question of why new Architects need to be generated. The answer is actually pretty obvious. First, of course, there will always be accidents. The tissue sample we scanned in the Ice Spires cache in Sector 0 belongs to an individual who was crushed while mining ion cube components. It is likely that this individual truly did die, as there would be no way to restore a backup of their brain. And second, new Architects were likely generated for specific tasks. Perhaps the team on 4546b who was researching Kara were generated specifically for that task. This could also be why Architects were raised in broods, because they're effectively being raised alongside their coworkers. We also know that Architects kept pets. However, Alan says that they were test subjects for potential genetic enhancements, which is what the conversation focuses on, but he also says that pets bring a sense of presence and energy, implying that there was some pleasure in owning a pet as an Architect. It is possible that the cuttlefish was an Architect pet, as we can find one in the Lost River laboratory in the crater. And like I said, I have several theories about the cuttlefish, so I won't start here as they're very off topic. If you want to hear my theories though, let me know in the comments and subscribe for more. Perhaps the most prominent information that we know about the Architects is that they were spacefaring. Not just that, but they had an intergalactic civilization. We know that 4546b is in the Andromeda Galaxy, and we also know that at some point in time, the Architects either visited Earth in the Milky Way galaxy or came into contact and traded with a civilization that had visited Earth, as they possessed a sword from Earth dating back to the 13th century. We also know that they are not originally from 4546b, and used it primarily as a research facility during the Kara outbreak. We also know that they did the same thing on other planets that were distant from their core worlds. We also know that they encountered other sapient life, including the Sea Emperors. We can infer this based on all of the different artifacts on display in their various bases. Now for my most out there theory. I believe that the Architects had other non-Architect, non-human people, or I guess aliens, working in their bases on 4546b. My museum theory from earlier is the biggest reason, but also that in the quarantine enforcement platform, there are weapons that do not resemble Architect technology. Additionally, the PDA entry for the alien rifle suggests that the Architects may have employed humanoids. Surely, the Architect weapons would be integrated into their bodies, much like we see with Alan's mechanical arms. I truly believe that the Architects had other species working with them on the cure for Kara. Call it Hope Core or whatever, but I choose to believe that the Architects were not all cold and calculated like we are led to believe. We know that they form bonds with pets in their own way, and we know that they're capable of feeling shame and grief, as well as affection. If a disease was threatening to wipe out life on an intergalactic scale, I truly believe that the Architects would come together with the best minds they could possibly find in order to stop the bacterium. They may have even backed up the minds of these other people onto the Sanctuary data hubs. We just don't know. I have more evidence of this theory in the Subnautica 2 segment that we'll get to shortly, but I truly believe that Architects had other people with them on 4546b. I can see the counter arguments of why do we not find any remains, or why is there no accommodation for the races, or why couldn't the Sea Emperor reach out to the other people? To those arguments, I do have rebuttals. 1. We don't see any Architect remains, nor do we see any human remains from the Aurora or the Degassi or the Sunbeam or the Mercury 2. Some things like that can be explained as limitations of the medium, or you could say that creatures on 4546b eat all of the remains, or that bacteria in the water break down dead tissue incredibly quickly. Okay, currently editing the video right now, I do want to say that we do see remains for Architect tissue, but the remains that we see are not underwater, which the remains that we do see are in the glacial basin cache, which in the game it does say that the ice and cold has preserved those tissues. It's also not underwater, so that could also play into something. The skeleton, that makes sense that got preserved where it was. It was likely could have been placed there. We don't know. And then the organs that we see are in a container, so it makes sense that they didn't decay. Either way, I just wanted to address that because that was a big hole in my argument that I completely didn't acknowledge in the script, so I just wanted to say something. 2. Maybe the Architects constructed vessels for other races, like how they made vessels for themselves. More likely, there is probably housing for Architects and presumably non-Architects somewhere on the planet that we haven't seen. To quote the PDA,
it may be prudent to separate work and leisure spaces to maximize productivity.
It isn't far-fetched to assume that the Architects and others use their arches to commute to and from work. Even if the Architects don't have a boundary between work and non-work, we know that they have places of reflection, implying that they don't work constantly around the clock. And 3. We don't know how the Sea Emperor's telepathy works. Maybe the other races just happen to be incompatible with the Sea Emperor. Like, what if they were plants or fungi rather than animals, and thus their brains were different, if they even had brains in the traditional sense to begin with? Or maybe the other races had some technology that allowed them to connect to the Architect network and made them unable to receive the telepathy of the Sea Emperor. All of this is to say, though, that this is my personal theory based on small pieces of evidence that were almost certainly not intended nor considered by the developers. Do let me know your own thoughts and personal theories in the comments. Alan is the only active Architect that we know of. He led the research effort in search of a cure for Kara on 4546b. We know that Alan went against network directive when he attempted to incubate the eggs of a sea dragon, and it was under his watch that the bacterium escaped containment and infected life on 4546b. We know that sometime later, Alan went into storage. We don't know much, if anything, about Alan's life before these events. However, I do have a personal theory. In the Dune Sanctuary cache in the crater, we can download a data file that details the early life of an Architect as follows. Was grown from a seed 1,708 Earth years ago. Separated from broodlings early for special training. Inducted into Temple of Research as the youngest ever initiate at age 96. Downloaded a corrupted dataset and was stored for 3 years for refactoring. Relocated to the Outer Galaxy Cluster to support disease research endeavors. Relocated to 4546b for high priority disease research. Contracted Kara bacterium. Stored in Sanctuary 3, corporeal body safely disposed. This could be Alan, as it states that this individual was separated from other members of their brood early for special training, presumably regarding Kara, and that they were sent to 4546b to work on disease research endeavors. The most telling piece of evidence in this entry for me is the fact that this individual received a corrupt dataset and needed to be refactored. If this log were referring to Alan, this could be why he disobeyed the network. He had a history of what could effectively be considered mental illness. His mind was corrupted in the past, and he had to get help for it. Perhaps the strain from the pressure of leading the research effort corrupted his mind in some way, which allowed him to disobey his network. The one one issue that I can see with this theory is that the individual in the data download was uploaded to Sanctuary 3, whereas we find Alan in Sanctuary 0. One rebuttal could be that he was sent to Sanctuary 3 before being reprinted into a new vessel. However, we simply do not have enough information. Let me know your thoughts. Another theory as to why Alan disobeyed the network directive could be simply that he was in charge of the mission, so he held executive control over what exactly happened. All of this being said, Alan does show remorse for his actions, and his main goal is to return to his homeworld to make amends, however that may be. Alan does seem to be capable of making friendships, or at least what could be perceived as friendships. While he is housed within Robin's head, at first he is cold, but eventually, rather quickly actually, he warms up. As much as an architect can, at least. Even when released from Robin's mind, he upholds fairness by keeping his promise to explain what happened regarding the bacterium. He then asks if him withholding the information concerned Robin. Alan has a very dry manner of speaking, and so I may read the implications of what he's saying differently than you might, but I interpreted this as him gauging forgiveness from the only companion he has had in over a millennia. If you interpreted this differently, let me know. I want to know how you characterized Alan in your head. Other than this though, once Alan gets his own vessel, he does address Robin warmly on multiple occasions and even takes her to the Architect homeworld. This is likely a huge deal, as Robin will have been the first human on the planet, possibly even the first non-native life form. The point being that Alan trusts Robin and cares for her to some degree. I think that if Alan knew what a cat was, he would definitely be a cat person. The following segment will contain spoilers for Subnautica 2 Early Access 1. All information in this segment is subject to change and likely will. A reminder to keep the comments spoiler/leak free, and that my Discord is linked in the description and has a dedicated channel for those kind of discussions. First, I'd like to talk about technology. We don't explicitly see any new Architect technology yet in Subnautica 2, unless you count the Rosetta Stone. However, we do see what we can assume is Altera's reverse engineering of Architect technology. The most notable being reprinting, as it is nearly the same process that Alan's vessel undergoes, as human minds are fabricated into new bodies. Interestingly, these bodies also do possess cybernetics, as the PDA in Subnautica 2 is printed directly into the Pioneer's body. We can also presume that Altera has reverse engineered a way to store mass amounts of information like the human mind, or in the case of PDA,
all human knowledge,
which by the 23rd century, or later, as we don't know exactly when Subnautica 2 takes place yet, is significantly more than we have now. Another small piece of technology that stood out to me is the hatch, interestingly enough, as the technology in the hatch is very reminiscent of the Architect doors that keep the water out of bases. Next, I want to talk about Architect language. We learn that the Architect language is called Architect Linear. We know that this is the same language that is translated by the PDA in Subnautica 1 and Subnautica Below Zero. Architect Linear is incredibly linear in terms of grammar and lacks any context. The PDA states that it is unlikely that this language can be spoken out loud. This makes sense, as the Architects likely simply transmitted this language as data, to the extent that we know that Architect Linear is more closely related to a programming language than anything else. We also know that all Altera devices are capable of translating the language, implying that Altera has been working with Architect technology for some time now. Finally, I'd like to talk about the Axum. The Axum actively reached out to the Architects for help with saving their world trees. This can imply two things. One, the Axum revered the Architects as gods that would answer their prayers, or two, and I'm more partial to this one as it supports my social architect theory from earlier, the Architects made contact with the Axum and regularly interacted with them. It's possible that the Axum may have even been present on 4546B to help with the research efforts. We just don't know enough about the Axum or their history yet. Whatever your personal theories may be, I would love to discuss them in my Discord server. Like I said, links in the description. And that is everything we know about the Architects so far. I'm excited to see what's to come in the future updates of Subnautica 2. Also, I'd like to thank you personally, the one watching right now, for the incredible support on my previous video. When I started writing this script, my previous video had already surpassed my goal of 100 views by like 100 times, and my channel is now monetized, so like genuinely thank you. I would love to hear what you want to see next. I'm thinking about doing some videos classifying and describing every creature in Subnautica 1 and Subnautica Below Zero in a similar way to how they are in Subnautica 2, or a video on all of the Altera lore. Let me know your thoughts. Also, as mentioned, I do have a Discord server if you'd like to join that. Otherwise, I would appreciate any constructive feedback that you may have on the video. I'd also like to take the time to plug my channel membership. There's no pressure to join or anything, only do it if you're able to and wanting to. I will say that I'm working on setting up a Minecraft server for members, so keep that in mind if you're interested. Again, thank you so much. Anyways, if you liked the video, that's great. If not, go watch something else. Bye.